Well, we all know that dogs make great companions for kids, but they can also help them deal with their disabilities. Have a look at this. It smells
You're doing some good listening today. Good listening. Go in the kitchen.
Hi.
Hi.
Atlas appeared to be pretty delayed in a lot of his communication, and there was a lot of behaviors. There was always food-related issues, but you know, he was able to name I think 5 parts of his face. He was able to count to 10. He was able to do some things, and then when he was around 16 or 17, 18 months old, he started to regress. So he started losing the skills that he had. He started losing some of the communication he had. So our investigations led us eventually to the autism diagnosis.
Good boy. Forward.
Harris came to us from an organization located in Cambridge called National Service Dogs. The program is for children between the ages of 2 and 10 years old with an autism diagnosis. So going to a restaurant used to be a very, very difficult and challenging task for a family. Any new environment or even transitioning in and out of a new environment is a very difficult thing. Since Harris has arrived, we walk into the restaurant, they're tethered, they remain tethered. Harris will be underneath the table, sitting at Atlas's feet. He has an iPad, and the iPad we use as a tool to manage behavior and to motivate him to eat non-preferred food items too. For me, the possibilities now are limitless. Harris has allowed the opportunity for Atlas to feel like he has more control and to offer him that independence, but to allow him to tolerate an environment because you know, his furry companion is right there with him in a way that he was not able to tolerate it at all before. So I think that it really opens up Atlas's world. The plan right now is for Atlas and Harris to go to school together starting in September. So Atlas will be entering senior kindergarten. I think it's just going to keep him calm, allow him to focus in so much of a better way. He's going to become a better student, and he's probably going to be more open to learning because his needs are being met through the dog.
Beautiful story. Please welcome Dr. Karyn Gordon with us right now, because we're going to continue along this track talking a little bit about if you are a parent with a child with a disability, how you might want to think about parenting. There are certain tips that might be universal, and this could be anything. It could be ADHD, it could be cerebral palsy, it could be anywhere along the spectrum.
Right.
What do you suggest for parents to keep in mind? Because it can be very challenging.
It can be challenging, and one of the things, again, I appreciate it. I love the story. I thought it was a beautiful story.
Yes.
I love that. But I think, a lot of times as a parent, we have dreams for our children.
Right.
We have this picture in our mind with what kind of child we're actually going to have. And so anything is off of that dream, it throws parents off, and a lot of times they don't really know how to kind of process it. There's a few different tips. Number one is you want to be proactive, and I really appreciated the mom in that tape piece where she sensed something was wrong and she took action. And so for a lot of times, if it's a physical issue, you're going to be seeing your family doctor. If it's an educational thing, you're going to be seeing a teacher. But when you sense just intuition, I really believe in the power of intuition for parents. A lot of times they'll be like, "Gosh, I knew something was on." Then don't just stand by the sidelines. Take action. A lot of times they're going to be getting assessments, and the way that I actually view assessments, it's just data. It's information. It's nothing to do with who you are as a person. It's just information about you. So you almost kind of want to externalize it. So step number one is you actually want to be proactive.
Who does the assessments?
Well, it depends with what the issue is. I mean, for her, she actually saw her physician. If it's more of a learning issue, it would be kind of like an educational, probably psychologist. So it depends on with whatever the issue is. But you just don't want to waste time because what you want to do is get the right information so then you know as a parent with what you should be doing differently.
And who would you ask about that? Would you ask the teacher for a reference?
You could if it's more of a learning style, but for most, if we're talking more of a physical side, the person you're going to go to is your doctor. Go to your doctor saying, I'm a little bit, something just doesn't seem right. What's kind of your take? So that's going to be number one. Okay, so number one. Number two is that once you actually get that information back, let's say that there is some kind of assessment, you want to talk openly with your children. It's very important to talk openly with your kids. And again, going back to that whole idea that to externalize the information, that this is really just about you. This isn't who you are as a person.
Right.
Really important, because how a parent kind of deals with that information will really affect how the child interprets that information.
What's tricky about that, though, is that so you want to be open with it and say that this is just something we are working through because it's one of the situations we have to work through. On the other hand, you don't want to get them into a situation where they feel like they are in some way disabled.
Right. Right.
And, you know, and different, and
Yes.
using that as an excuse.
Yes.
Like that's sort of it's a tough balance.
It is
for
a tough
parent.
balance. And so, well, a couple things. Actually, my son came home yesterday or 2 days ago. He's like, "Mommy, I learned that different is good." I'm like,
Right.
really?
That's a good lesson.
Like, wow. So yeah. So they're starting to teach that different is good, and that it's okay that we're all different in some shape or form. So I think if we almost kind of downplay the fact, and I would not use the word really disability.
Yeah.
I think disability
It's got a
lot-
negative connotation.
Well, it's got a very negative connotation. Like there's something wrong with me.
Right.
Right. Like there's something wrong with me versus. So I think how our language is actually really important.
Yeah. Okay.
The third one, which is really important, is that whatever that issue is, whether or not, let's say we found out our child has cerebral palsy or learning disability or ADHD or autism, whatever it is, you talk to the expert in that field, because all of these different areas are going to have experts. You're going to have an ADHD expert. You're going to have a cerebral palsy expert. You want to talk to the experts and ask them, what is a reasonable amount that my child, what should I be expecting of my child? What is reasonable with that particular issue? Because here's one of the biggest mistakes that I find a lot of times parents make is that they feel bad for their child, they pity their child,
Yeah.
and then they do too much for their child. And if a parent pities their child, the child pities themselves. If the parent's like, listen, this is just part of you, no biggie, we all have our issues, here's what I can expect of you, and here's what's reasonable, then it actually, it totally changes how the child actually interprets that information.
Right. This has to be an empowering thing,
An empowering
not a
thing.
sympathy pity thing.
Absolutely.
It's all right. We're all different.
We're all
so
different.
Let's just deal with
it's
your
not a big
particular
deal.
difference.
Yeah, so you're different in this area, no biggie. Here's
Yeah.
what we can now expect from you. And you're not going to know with what is a realistic expectation until you talk to that expert in that particular field. That's why
Okay.
you have to get the right information.
Okay.
And the final point I'll just mention very quickly is, and this kind of surprises people, it's very important that children actually grieve whatever that issue is.
Oh, really?
Yeah. and
Grieve in their own special way.
Grieve in their own way. So whether or not a child is blind, cerebral palsy, learning disability, like whatever it is, because what happens is if a child doesn't properly grieve, they become angry about it. They can become angry. They never fully accept it. It's always kind of like they're angry. It's like, this isn't fair. This isn't fair that I'm actually like this.
Right.
And I've seen this with adolescents where, you know, I've had cases where teens have epilepsy or they got cerebral, and there's so much anger. The parent's like, I can't understand why they're so angry. I'm like, because they haven't grieved that. And they're like, but they've had that their whole life. It doesn't matter. It's hitting them now. They really see the difference. They need to really grieve and process that anger for them to actually accept it as part of who they are. And then they can kind of move on. And that really shocks a lot of parents.
And you encourage them to grieve?
Oh,
then?
grieving is really healthy.
Okay.
You're not going to be able to get to accepting and embracing that part of you until you actually grieve it. You can't really skip over it.
Yeah, that's not it. I wouldn't have thought of that step.
Yeah.
So really good tip.
Yeah.
That's great. Let's go to break. We've got more coming up. Stay with us.